on behalf of Dr. B.K.B College, Puranigudam, I welcome you to this international webinar, Pandemic Challenges and Strategies for Post-Crisis Development, which is organized by the Department of Economics of Dr. B.K.B College in collaboration with IQAC Pandu College of Guwahati. It gives us immense pleasure to inform you that participants from different places of India and outside India have also registered their names at this webinar. I welcome all the participants to this webinar. I have invited three prominent and well-known academicians as resource persons, and they will present their speeches on three different topics at this program, and hope their thought-provoking dialogues will help us in understanding the present critical crisis and enlighten us to prepare strategies for this post-crisis development. All the resource persons are well known to the participants and they are pride of Assam. Professor Hiranya Kumar Nath sir, presently working at the Department of Economics and International Business of Sam Houston State University, Texas, USA. I welcome you, sir. We also invited Professor Devakumar Chakraborty sir. Sir is presently working at the Department of Economics of Dibrugarh University, Dibrugarh, Assam. I think sir is not entered in our meeting till now. And I also welcome you, sir. And Dr. Binoy Goswami sir is currently serving as an assistant professor at the Department of Economics, South Asian University, New Delhi. I welcome you, sir, also to this program. I'm happy to state that you have accepted my request and give consent to participate in this event as a resource persons. Thank you once again, sir. Our principal, sir, Dr. Nipen Chandra Das, sir, is also present among us. I welcome you, sir. It is a joint venture with Pandu College, Guwahati. On behalf of Pandu College, Dipjyoti Barman, sir, coordinator of IQAC, is also present among us. I also welcome you, sir. Now, I would like to request our principal, sir, to deliver the inaugural speech on this occasion, and requesting principal, sir, to conclude the speech within 5 minutes. Over to principal, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Bharali. Your sound is a bit low.
Oh.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Present at this international webinar on pandemic challenges and strategies for post-crisis development. Honorable resource persons, Professor Hiranya Kumar Nath, Sam Houston State University, Texas, Professor Devakumar Chakraborty, Dibrugarh University, Dr. Binoy Goswami, South Asian University, New Delhi, all the members of the organizing committee of Dr. B.K.B College and Pandu College, Honorable Principal of Pandu College, and esteemed participants. It is known to all that COVID-19 pandemic has created unprecedented situations which have been rising all over the world. And initially, it seemed that everything was going to be collapsed all over the world. Tourism industry collapsed in almost all the countries of the world. Aviation industry collapsed in the countries around the world. International trade and commerce came to a standstill. So early panic situations somehow eased to some extent at the present moment. But many things became critical. Millions of people became jobless around the world. Many thousands of people came to the street. Use of the migrant laborers became very critical. So every things in the world became very, very critical, but somehow it seemed that within two, 3 months, things are going to be normal because vaccines and medicines are coming up. So in these situations, what will be the strategies to cope with the challenges and problems? We have to think about the strategies. We have to develop our strategies. Every country has to develop its strategies to cope with the challenges and problems. So everything should be in order again. In this webinar, our resource persons will address all these issues of the post-crisis development, and the purpose of the webinar will be successful. So with these few words, I would like to conclude my short speech, and I declare the webinar inaugurated. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Sir. Now, I would like to request Deputy Burman Sir to say a few words on this occasion, and requesting Burman Sir to conclude the speech within 5 minutes. Over to Burman Sir. Am I audible?
Dr. Varali, your voice is a little bit low.
It is maximum.
Yeah.
Am I audible to Burman Sir?
Yes, yes.
You are audible, but your voice is a little bit low.
Oh.
So, good morning to all. Respected Principal of Dr. B.K.B College, Dr. Nitendra Sandudas Sir, Honorable Research Persons of today's webinar, Professor Hirendra Kumar Nath Sir of Assam State University, Texas, Professor Devok Kumar Chakraborty of Dibrugarh University, Dr. Binoy Goswami of South Asian University, New Delhi, respected coordinator of today's webinar, Dr. Avinash Purari, and my respected participants from various academic institutions of all over the world. So it is a great pleasure and honor for me to be here today as the guest of honor of today's international webinar on pandemic challenges and strategies for post-crisis development, organized by Department of Economics of Dr. B.K.B College in association with Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Pandu College, Guwahati. So the theme taken by the organizer is very relevant in present day situation, which is going all over the world now due to this COVID-19 disease. So as you all know that this coronavirus disease seem to be originated in the Wuhan provinces of China in December 2019, and after that it spread to the whole world within a short span of time. The World Health Organization has named the virus as COVID-19, and on March 11, 2020, due to its alarming level of spread and severity, this World Health Organization has declared this COVID-19 as a pandemic. So it has become very uncontrollable, and since no vaccine has yet discovered, so it is still not under control. So this pandemic has forced almost all the nations in the world to remain shut down for many days. You can say for many months, rather you can say. So all religious, cultural, and all socio-economic activities all over the world have come to stand still. We will have to stop. So thousands of people have lost their lives, and lakhs of people got infected. So in this situation, almost all the sectors got affected from this pandemic, including agriculture, food processing, e-commerce, education, tourism, hospitality, all over, then healthcare industry, defense, security, together with all unorganized sectors. So this pandemic will definitely have a serious and long-term economic consequences around the globe. So therefore, in order to face the challenges of this situation, in post-academic era, we need short-term and definitely very long-term, well-planned strategy. So today, we have very three well-known, experienced, and learned resource persons among us who will speak on three very important topics related to this pandemic. And I'm very happy to inform that two of the resource persons, Professor Hiranya Kumar Nath and Professor Devakumar Chakraborty, were my contemporary during my studies in Cotton College. And one is senior to me, other one is Devakumar Chakraborty was junior to me. And I know them very well. And I hope, I'm not hope, I'm sure with this presence of such a resourceful resource person, very academician, this webinar will be a great success. So once again, thank you, the organizer, for giving me this opportunity to say a few words on this occasion. So I especially thank you to Dr. Varali for giving me this opportunity and principals of B.K.B College. Also, I wish a great success of this webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you, Borman sir. With due permission of our resource persons, now I would like to start the technical sessions. May I, sir? Sir, now I wanted to start the technical sessions. May I, sir?
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to request Professor Hiranya Kumar Nath sir to deliver his speech on the good, the bad, and the ugly of COVID-19. The platform is open for Nath sir. Please, sir.
Thank you very much, and very good morning to all of you. First, I would like to thank Department of Economics, Dr. Birinsi Kumar Borua College, and IQAC Pandu College for giving me this opportunity to speak at this webinar. Well, when Dr. Varali contacted me, and I came to know that two of my good colleagues, Professor Devakumar Chakraborty and Dr. Binoy Goswami will be presenting at this webinar, then I told him that I will be then talking on a more general topic because they both are competent economists with a lot of insights, and I am sure they will give you their perspective from the economic side. Besides, I have been speaking at a large number of webinars in Assam and in the Northeast for last couple of weeks. And I have been extensively talking about macroeconomic impact, fiscal policy issues, monetary policy issues, impact on education system, impact on healthcare system. So I thought that instead of talking about or focusing more on economic aspects or economic issues, I will take this opportunity because I have these two good friends who I am sure will be enlightening you on economic issues. So I will take this opportunity to a little bit of philosophize on this whole crisis and kind of present the good, the bad, and the ugly of COVID-19. So what is the good of a crisis? What good can come up out of a crisis, right? So that's where I start. And since I have been confined to my apartment for last 4 months, of course, it is a very crazy time. It is a very weird time. It is not a normal time. Of course, I have been teaching. Right now, I'm not teaching, but I taught for almost 3 months from my apartment. I have been doing other academic stuff from home. I have not gone out. Probably in 4 months, I have gone out only 5 times. and that is for just a short while. So during this time, what has happened to me and what has happened in general, and that's what I would like to think aloud. So in every crisis, whether it is a personal crisis, societal crisis, national crisis, or a global crisis, of course, there are a lot of challenges and we have to face the challenge. And sometimes we do well, and sometimes it is very hard to overcome those challenges. But I also believe that every crisis also creates an opportunity to introspect at the personal level, at societal level, at the state level, at the national level. Even in this crisis, it will be at the global level. So as a society, when we introspect, of course, we will try to figure out what are our shortcomings. And this identification of our shortcomings will also lead us to think about the correction paths. And hopefully society, our society, the nations, the world, humankind as a whole is doing the introspection. Of course, it is too early to kind of figure out, or too early to see what exactly will happen as a result of this societal introspection, or as a result of this introspection on the part of the nation states or on the part of the humankind. Because if you kind of look at history, for example, 100 years back, what happened, let's say after the First World War? Well, back in 1918, there was another pandemic, right? And after that, what happened? We had the Great Depression. After the Great Depression, we had the Second World War. Of course, after those crises, of course, humankind came out, at least reading history, I thought that came out stronger. They had kind of developed certain new things which helped better our human conditions. And I'm hoping that even after this crisis is over, the society or humankind as a whole will come up with things, or come up with organization, institutions, or ideas that will better our human conditions. In last 4 months, I also have come to these following realizations, and I'm sure many of you have realized the same thing that I have. Like any other natural disaster, this virus also does not discriminate. It does not discriminate between poor and rich, does not discriminate by religion, by gender, by nationality, so it does not discriminate. And when more I think about this realization or this fact, it also amusingly, it reminds me of a kind of a very well-known quote. Well, somebody said that 5 minutes after your birth, they decide your name, nationality, religion, and creed, religion and sect. And you spend rest of your life defending something you did not choose. And it is amusing to think about that, because we are divided by nationality, we divided by our religion, we are divided by our language, we are divided by many different ways, right? But when we think about our natural birth process, this is uniform across the globe. Similarly, when we are hit by this kind of natural calamities, then there is no discrimination, there is no division, right? And this realization hopefully will, and some people probably will recognize this and will lead to ideas which will be based on those universal things which bind us as one, irrespective of where we live, what we speak, or what language we speak, or what religion we practice. The second realization that I have been thinking about is that, and this crisis has actually brought up that a lot of people, a large number of people, don't have the scientific temper. And to deal with a situation like this, I think we need a scientific temper. Now, what do I mean by a scientific temper? Of course, there is a formal definition of scientific temper. But to have a scientific temper, you do not have to be a scientist. one of the indicators of a scientific indicator of a scientific temper is that you have to recognize that science, there are a lot of unknowns which science has not explored. And when we kind of face a situation like the situation we have faced in last 6 months, you need to realize that as science tries to know, or as science tries to discover, as science tries to learn about this new situation, we have to be patient. We have to listen to what scientists say about this evolving situation, and we need to conduct our life in such a way so that we are safe. At the same time, we help the scientific community to understand or to explore or to discover, to handle this new situation. So that is the importance of scientific temper. The fact that a lot of people do not have the scientific temper has created a lot of problems even in this crisis period. So this is one realization. The other realization is that we are not prepared for unknowns, unseen, and unforeseen. In spite of the fact that a lot of scientists, a lot of public health experts, and a lot of people who are knowledgeable or who kind of think about these things, they have been predicting that there will be a situation like this. In spite of that, people, states, leaders, they have not paid attention to. In other words, we are not prepared for unknowns, unseen, and unforeseen. And that is true in our economic life as well. Well, as we were hit by this pandemic and we had to kind of go for lockdown or shutdown. Well, after a while, now that we are into like 3 to 4 months into this pandemic and these restrictions, it is kind of quite apparent that we are not really prepared for these unknowns and unseen. Right? So when it comes to economic preparedness, right? So obviously there is a section of the society who cannot be prepared for such situation because they are at the lower spectrum of the economic scale, right? But then even if you look at the middle income people who probably have a petty business or a petty trade or probably works in a company, right? Even they are not, it looks like, and they are not prepared. They are not prepared. Some of the simple things that we need to do in our economic and financial life, it is kind of a little alarming for me to observe that when I look at our society, meaning, let's say I look at our society in Assam or in India, then I realize that this generation, my generation and the generations after my generation, they are not very thoughtful about their financial planning or the economic planning. For example, a simple rule in finance is when you are young, if you earn 10 rupees, then you have to save 5 rupees out of 10 rupees. So as you kind of age and go along, obviously you may be able to, or you may be, if you can afford to probably save a little less, but then you have to do that savings so that not only because you need savings for your future, but also because of these unknowns, uncertain times, right? And that does not even happen at the societal level. Of course, there are a lot of factors which may have contributed. And when I compare my generation or the generations after me with my parents' generation was more kind of risk averse. They used to do very good financial planning, although they may not be rich or they may not be even higher middle income people, right? So somehow we have not, in recent years, we have seen that this financial planning or economic planning or this preparation for unknowns has not been really good. And that is going forward. I hope that people have realized that, and going forward, they will do better financial and economic planning. And that can happen even collectively. For example, when I look at our villages actually given the assets, the collectively for the people who live in the villages, I think we have got enough resources or assets to kind of weather a situation like this. But there is no good collective planning when it comes to the villages as well. For example, every village in Assam, for example, has public property resources, right? And those public property resources like ponds or even namghars and all this, and they don't kind of use it as a viable economic means for, let's say, building a rainy day fund, right? Which will benefit not only, which will benefit everyone in the village. So those kind of preparedness, I think hopefully this crisis has brought up that we are not prepared for those unknowns, unseen and unforeseen. And hopefully people at the individual level and even at the societal level, they will think more in a more robust way to have a better preparation for those unknowns or for those crises. Now, if you look at, so apart from those kind of a little philosophizing what good a crisis can bring up, let's take a look at some of the good things that are happening. Okay, so if you look at Indian road accidents, for example, right? So over the last 25 years, there is a huge increase in the number of motorized vehicles, right? People have resources. As a result, they can afford vehicles, but at the same time, we do not have wider roads, not yet. As a result, there are traffic congestion, and at the same time, we don't have very good road safety measures, and as a result, there are a lot of accidents every day. If you look at the entire country, and as a result, there are a lot of injuries and deaths. In last 4 months, that road fatalities has come down. So according to an estimate, apparently these are kind of real-time data. In fact, total number of road crashes has come down from 37,018, that is in March 24 to 31st May 2019, that is the first 2 phases of lockdown, right? So if you compare that to the similar period last year, that has come down from 37,000 to 11,000. It is a decrease of 68%. Similarly, the death rate has come down, number of deaths has come down as a result of accidents by 62%, and number of injuries has come down by 73%. So that is something that is hopeful, that is good and that is because, well, of course, because of the restrictions, because of the lockdowns, there are not too many vehicles on the street. People are not traveling. The transportation is being restricted, and that has contributed to that. Of course, you also can look at population and improve air quality. So apparently, according to all the data that is available right now, the pollution in megacities has gone down, and the air quality has improved according to the data for megacities, which includes Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, and Kolkata. They have achieved 95% of the National Clean Air Program target. So again, that is something positive that has happened as a result of the lockdown, which has followed the pandemic. And then if you look around the world, you will see that there are technological inventions and innovation. And that is a very kind of common thing that happens around crisis. So when there is a crisis, in order to solve the problems that is thrown to us by the crisis, the scientists, the engineers, the doctors, the people, or the people who are involved in businesses, they go for technological inventions as well as innovations. To give you some examples, for example, in this pandemic, one thing that is sure that for a kind of long period of time or going forward, we probably will have to maintain social distancing or the physical distance. And as a result, that will be a challenge for transportation, right? Transportation and travel. Particularly if you think about the air transportation or air travel, inside an aircraft, the seats are very close to each other, and as a result, it will be very difficult to maintain social distancing. So here, people have already started thinking about designing the seats inside an aircraft in such a way that the physical contact is less. So this is one of the designs that people have come up. Of course, there, if you kind of try to look at or read all those journals and magazines, you will find many other suggestions, but that's what happens. People start thinking creatively when there is a crisis. Not only that, well, again, it has been going on for a while. So this is the delivery of your parcels and packages by unmanned drone. And already companies like Amazon has been doing this for some time now. And going forward, since now physical distancing will be a new norm, so this use of unmanned drone to deliver your packages and parcel probably will go up. There are a lot of other technology-enabled innovations in business organization. For example, if you think about the supply chain, which is essentially the movement of goods or services from the producer to the consumer, or if you think about the value chain, which is essentially the production process, right? So in last 20 years, if you look at what has happened because of this huge advances in technology, particularly information and communication technology, there have been a lot of changes in supply chain management and value chain management. And these are innovations which are enabled by the technology, right? I recently have published a kind of a long paper where we talk about, with my co-authors, where we talk about this kind of innovations. For example, we have talked about automation, we have talked about outsourcing, then operation shifting, then service redesign. So there are a lot of innovations which have taken place, which are enabled or which have been facilitated by the technological advances. Okay. And then, of course, now this crisis has also created a lot of charitable work. For example, one of the things that happened just in front of my eyes in last 3 months is a voluntary organization called Get Us PPE, that is personal protective equipment, right? So it started on March 16 by 2 doctors, and now it has become almost a global organization, has been kind of accumulating or procuring a lot of personal protective equipment for the healthcare workers, to help the healthcare workers. Because in the beginning, if you remember, it was a problem. There was a shortage of PPE in the US and in most other countries. Okay. Of course, when you think about these inventions and innovations and technology-enabled innovations, these things also have implications for jobs and wages. So that will affect our economic life. And that is a very important point. So you should also be prepared, or everybody should be prepared about all these innovations and how they are going to affect your employment, or if you are going to affect your job. For example, since now personal distancing will be a norm, so all these works that involve physical activity or physical closeness, now the nature of that job will change, right? So for example, if everybody starts using those unmanned drone in order to deliver packages, then what will happen to all the delivery persons, right? Courier delivery persons, or what will happen to all the mailmen, postmen and there is a large number of those employees or those workers. So what will happen to them? again, so this is those are the things that we have to think about. What are the bad, or what is the bad of COVID-19? So as of July 18, that is today here, well, it is actually yesterday here. So in the whole world, more than 14 million people are infected by this virus, and out of that, about 6 lakhs have lost their life, which is about 4.23% of the total people infected. In India, it is now over 1 million. We have 26,273 fatality, which is about 2.5%. So death rate compared to world average is low in India. When it comes to Assam, it is 20,646, out of which 41 have lost their life. Whether it is 1 life or 1 million life, it is a life, it is a loss, it is not good, it is bad, right? So that is the bad of COVID-19. It is an unknown virus, new virus. The science has not even understood the virus very well even now. And so that is, I would say, is the most important bad of COVID-19. And then it comes after life, it comes to your livelihood. So it has disrupted our livelihood, right? And if you look at the IMF outlook, it is projecting that in 2020, the world will shrink. The world GDP, that is the total quantity of goods and services produced in the world, will shrink by about 5%. It will be 5% lower than the previous year. But going forward in 2021, it will increase according to the projection which came out in the end of month June. It will grow by 5.4%. For India, the shrinkage or the decline in GDP will be 4.5%, and in 21 it will be 6%. But again, you remember that doesn't matter how good an economist is; these are all kind of it will be foolish to just stick to these numbers, because these numbers are based on a lot of assumptions, and those can change because it is still an evolving crisis. And therefore these numbers, even if you look at IMF economic outlook from April to June, they have changed significantly, because in April they said that India will grow by about slightly more than 1% during 2020. But by June, they changed it. It is now changed to a shrinkage of 4.5%. So these numbers, well, again, it is very hard to project those things, and particularly in the middle of a crisis. Of course, the unemployment will be very high. A lot of people will be without job, and they will have a hard life, hard time. And obviously, when you look at the economy, the most vulnerable sections will be the ones who will suffer the most. And that is a bitter truth about life, and that is what I can see right now, and that probably will happen. And then there has been disruptions to education, and that has disrupted human capital accumulation, which is worrisome. And the way for countries like United States, of course, we are delivering our education online remotely. We have a good infrastructure here, and as a result, it has been disrupted, but still, I think we have been able to manage. Of course, there are some other problems which will probably keep disrupting this process. But in a country like India, where we have a lot of students who are in school or who are in colleges or universities, but we don't have the infrastructure, as a result, they are suffering. And again, this will affect the students unequally. The students who are from well-off background, I think they will be okay eventually, but the people from the lower socioeconomic spectrum, they will have problems. Well, there have been disruption to healthcare now that our not very good healthcare system has focused on COVID-19. As a result, people with other ailments are not getting treatment, or they are not getting as attention from the healthcare system, and that has impacted our another component of human capital, which is health. Mental health is again a big problem because of the crisis, because of all these uncertainties. People are facing a lot of uncertainty, and they of course that will have a huge impact on your mental health. And given in a country like in India, the other problem is we don't have a good system to manage mental health. According to some reports, the number of suicides have already gone up in India. Increased domestic violence. Apparently, recently, the domestic violence has gone up even in India. If you compare the number of reported cases during the first two phases of lockdown, that is much higher than the previous 10 years. And that is, again, of course, these are only reported cases, and God knows how many unreported cases we will have. What is the ugly? That is the last part of this presentation. So what is the ugly side of the virus? Of course, I always think that things get ugly or things get worse because of our action. Well, there is good and bad that can happen naturally, but things get ugly when we don't take good decision, or when we engage in bad actions. Okay, so that's where it is. So now there have been some studies, or there have been some thinking going on around the world. So if you look at how the countries are doing in terms of their pandemic responses, it has been a function of three things. And this is not according to me, but this is according to a very well-known intellectual of our time, Francis Fukuyama. And it is a function of three things. One is the public health and the healthcare system in the country, leadership, and social trust. And because of these three things, you will see that some democracies are doing well. It is not about the political regime. Some democracies are doing well, some are not doing well. Some autocracies are doing well, some are not doing well, right? Because this is about, according to him, these three things. And I kind of agree to a large extent. These are three important things. So how people trust their government is important. And it is also important what kind of leadership you have, whether the leadership leadership listen to the scientific community, or leadership kind of is guided by political interest. And even in the country where I live, I can see that very vividly. So over time, if you look at what will happen is, of course, it's still an evolving situation. Economic hardship will increase, right? So if it continues, and now I think today there was a report by the World Bank that there are a few months for India to reach the peak, apparently. So Indian case is evolving very slowly, according to WHO. And only after 3-4 months, India will reach a peak. So if we have to wait another 3-4 months, that will obviously be catastrophic to many people in our country. It's a huge country with a large population. Okay? And of course, as time goes by, people will grow impatient. Science cannot work well. Science is trying very hard. Scientists all around the world, they are trying hard to understand the virus, to find cure to find cure, and also to kind of find out a vaccine. But that process cannot be expedited, right? So as a result, it has a natural progression. And in the meantime, people are growing impatient, and of course, this evolving knowledge, because knowledge has evolved about the virus and is getting politicized in many parts of the world. It is unfortunate, but it is, again, that has to do with what I said before, that a large number of people don't have that scientific temper. So if you have a scientific temper, you will understand that the science takes time to find out the truth about a certain situation. So that is not the case, and as a result, that has been politicized. Since it's a global pandemic, and all the countries around the world have been affected by this crisis, as a result, for the policymakers, for the government, the policy space is getting narrower and narrower. There are not too many options because resources are scarce, at the same time, it is already in an economic crisis, right? And of course, polarization in many different dimensions, social dimension, political dimension, they are kind of going on, which again would not have happened probably if a larger number of people had the scientific temper. Anyway, these over time, what I said, what is going to happen will make it even harder for the leadership, for the policymaker, for the state to handle this situation. So they will have to kind of tread a very thin line where managing this crisis, not only the COVID crisis, but also the economic crisis, which is a much bigger crisis, will be very difficult. Choosing policy will be very, very important. Prioritizing prioritizing different options will be very, very important. So again, depending on what decision the leadership makes, what decision people make, what decision societies make will eventually tell us whether the effect of COVID will be just bad or will be ugly. So with that, let me kind of stop because my time is over. Thank you very much for listening. Again, thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. If you have any questions, I am sure after Professor Debo Chakraborty and Professor Dr. Binoy Goswami present, I think we'll have some opportunity for question and answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nath sir. It is a nice presentation, and we will discuss the questions at the last of the technical sessions. Now, I want DKC sir is not available. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, actually, I cannot find Devo Kumar Chakraborty, sir.
Yes. I'm searching. DKC sir, Devo Kumar Chakraborty sir is not available in our meeting. So I request Dr. Binoy Goswami sir to present his deliberation on pandemic, public institutions, and social welfare. Over to Goswami sir.
All right. So, Avinash, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me first share my screen. And can you see the slide?
Yes, sir, but it is partly, it is not full screen.
I'll do that.
Yes, sir.
It's fine now. Is it okay now?
Still not.
I have made it full screen.
It may take some time, sir. Actually, it is on net now.
Okay, but you can hear me, right?
Yes,
Sir.
So let me start.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, good morning to all of you. And I would like to thank first B.K.B College and IQAC cell of Pandu College for organizing this webinar and giving me this opportunity to participate in this webinar. So as Professor Nath has already spoken about the more general issues related with this pandemic, this health crisis. Actually, when I looked at the schedule, I saw that Professor Nath was going to speak on the general issues, and Professor Chakraborty would speak on the Indian economy, the challenges to Indian economy, and therefore I thought probably I can further reduce the scope of my presentation to the much local level. So that way I will be focusing more on not exactly on Assam economy, but something related to the Assam economy and what are the lessons that we can learn, for certain sectors, in the for the Assam economy. So what I'm going to talk about is, so basically my basic argument is, the point which I'm trying to make here is that, there are certain areas where, of course, we know that state has to intervene, state has to deliver. Like, for example, basic health and education. It's the role of the state to, supply those basic services, because theoretically as well as empirically, a lot of studies have proven, established this, that if you leave it to the market, those services will be undersupplied. But in a situation like the current one, the current pandemic, state's responsibility become overarching, and those areas which otherwise wherein the market otherwise can deliver, even in those areas, state has to step in. But all of a sudden, it's not possible for the state to step in if you don't have the required infrastructure already in place. And that makes a case for, even in certain areas where the market can deliver, states should also at least develop certain infrastructure and should step in at least to some extent. So that's the point that I'm trying to make. I begin by defining what are institutions. So institutions are nothing but formal and informal rules. The informal rules are also called norms, the social norms, within which we organize our economic and social life. In fact, economy can be viewed as a set of institutions, and it consists of all those institutions that mediate and support the basic economic activities like production, exchange, distribution, and accumulation. And there's a huge body of literature that argues that, it's the history, structure, and functioning of the institutions that determine the nature of an economy. So while explaining why certain countries are poor, and some other countries are rich, so this trend of literature would focus on the institution. And in a way that is true, because nothing happens in vacuum. Everything happens within an institutional framework, right? So, you read Asimoglu, Robinson, and all those, literature. So you will find that even if at first you would sort of find that, the income differential between countries or among countries are because of the differences in the endowment of physical capital or natural capital or human capital. But then still you can ask this question of why those countries, certain countries would have more endowment of those capital or those resources. And then ultimately the answer lies at the door of, those set of institutions. So institutions are therefore very important. Now, broadly speaking, there are three major types of institutions that organize our economic and social life: market, state, and communities. And these three institutions organize our, economic life through three C's: market through competition, state through coercion or forces, and communities through cooperations. And all these institutions exist side by side by complementing and supplementing each other. So for example, education and health can be provided by both state and market. So if suppose in certain areas, state has not been able to deliver, so market can step in, market can chip in. Land and forest can be managed through market, state, and communities. Food can be provided through market and state-owned institutions. On the other hand, while they complement each other, there might be competition among these institutions also. For example, proliferation of market might actually reduce space for communities. So there is this study by Sethi and Somanathan, which was published in American Economic Review in 1995. Therein, they have shown how the proliferation of market due to globalization may break down the community norm of cooperations. Because earlier you depend on communities when you don't have access to market. Now that you have access to market, you get those services for market. You can actually, so you no longer depend on community. So the point which I'm trying to make is that for economic development, proper economic development, what you need is an optimal combination of these three institutions. Now, coming to the state now, to focus on states, I'm not focusing more on market and communities, because in a crisis like situation like the one that we are in right now, markets links are severely disrupted. There are restrictions on market. Then communities also, again, there are restrictions because of the lockdown. You cannot come out and we can help each other. So, as I said, in this kind of a situation, has to play a very, very important role. Now, as I already said, there are certain areas where it is understood that state anyway has to deliver. Like, as I said, market, if you leave the supply of basic education and health services, market will undersupply. The state has to chip in there. But in these kind of situations, like the current one, the crisis that we are in, responsibilities of state becomes, as I said, overarching, and it get extended to those areas which otherwise can be left to market. So, for example, managing the supply side chain of fruits and vegetables. Now, that otherwise can be left to to the market. But in this kind of a situation, you have to. I mean, the state has a role even to supply fruits, and might play a role in supplying fruits and vegetables. Now, why do I talk about fruits and vegetables? There are hundreds of examples that one can pick up. Now, I pick up these fruits and vegetables. That's because, one, there are two issues because of which, if you don't have a proper fruits and vegetable supply chain, that in a situation like this, that can impact social welfare, public welfare severely. That is one, because they are essential. They are essential commodities. Number two, they are perishable in nature. So because of that, if you don't have a properly developed, organically developed supply chain, then even a small interruption in the market linkages, particularly when the supply chains are not developed organically, small interruption in the supply chains might actually result in huge loss. And those both of these have wide welfare implications. And
Binoy.
the reason. Yes.
Binoy, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your slide is, your video is not kind of moving. Yeah. We can hear you, but then the slide is frozen and your face is also frozen.
Okay, which slide can you see?
It's in the first slide. I can see only the first slide. The title slide.
I don't know what is the reason, but here I am moving actually. I'm changing the slides. But whether it is because of...
I think others are also having problem because I can see the chat box.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I don't know, but I am actually changing the slides.
Sir, it might be, sir, it is
once again, sir.
Sorry?
You can do it again, sir, once more. You can stop the slide share and do it once again, sir.
Again, sir.
Okay, let me do that. Let me do it one more time. How about now?
Yes.
Now you can see?
Yes.
I'm so sorry for this. I don't know what was the problem. Connectivity sometimes creates trouble. Anyway, so okay. So why do I focus on the fruits and vegetable supply chain? That is because, as I said, these are essential commodities. And given the perishable nature of these commodities, even if there is a small disruption in the supply chain, it might result in huge loss, all right? Huge welfare loss. And also, given my own experience of the feedback that I got from people in Assam and what I have experienced here in Delhi. So I, in fact, would like to, in remaining rest of my presentation, I would like to compare the experience that people in Assam, they have faced. And I what I have experienced here as far as fruits and vegetables are concerned. So that's the reason why I have chosen these fruits and vegetables. And these have, disruption in the fruit and vegetable supply chain because of these two reasons, which I have already spoken. There could be wider welfare ramification. Now contrast these two scenarios. So these are some news items that I have picked up from the newspapers in Assam. So these are, so for example, the first news item says, due to COVID-19 lockdown, most farmers in Assam failed to sell their agricultural produce due to lack of cold storage facilities within its reach, easy reach. Following mass violations, Assam shuts vegetable markets. Then Assam Gov fixes prices of vegetables to be sold in Kamrup Metro during lockdown. So basically the sense that I get from this, and also my own feedback that I collected from my family members and relatives in Assam. So the impression that I get is that the supply chain got completely disrupted, resulting in loss for farmers, hardship for consumer, particularly in the urban and semi-urban areas due to non-availability of these vegetables. And as a result of which prices also shoot up through the roof and government had to step in. And because of this problem, these confusions, there was mass violation of these lockdown conditions in the markets. State government did step in, but I don't think, that could give relief, to a large extent. So the impact was, the government's efforts impact was very limited. Contrary to that, you see the case in Delhi. In Delhi, when the first Janata curfew was announced, in a couple of days after that, there is a supply chain called Safal. In Delhi, there is a supply chain called Safal. So there, because of the panic purchase, the vegetable and fruit sales almost double. Thereafter, though it kind of stabilized, even today, the sales by this supply chain is 30% higher. And they geared up their supply chain, which was already in place, okay? And till 5th of April, they sold only in Delhi 3,600 metric tons of fruits and vegetables. So now let me just speak a little bit about Delhi's this Safal supply chain. Now why I pick up this, it's only because from my own experience, when people right now are purchasing, say carrot, for example, for 220 rupees per kilo, I purchase carrot here for 60, 70 rupees. Potatoes, when people in Assam are buying for 60, 70 rupees, I am still purchasing 30 rupees, 40 rupees per kg. Fruits you don't find, particularly in Guwahati, there's so much of crisis. But here, I still get like 3-4 varieties from South India, from Orissa, from Maharashtra, from all places. So what is that which made this difference? Why is it that even during this crisis in Delhi, I did not feel that impact, whereas in Assam, people are facing so much of hardship as far as the fruits and vegetables are concerned? Now, let me now talk a little bit about the Safal model. So Safal is actually the fruit and vegetable arm of the Mother Dairy. Mother Dairy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the National Dairy Development Board. National Dairy Development Board was established by an act of parliament, and it has been declared as an institution of national importance. And it was Mother Dairy is the subsidiary of the Dairy Development Board, which was commissioned in 1974. Safal is the fruit and vegetable arm of Mother Dairy. And this is the first company to organize fruits and vegetable business in India. And it is also present in the edible oil segment under the brand Thara. Now, how did Safal come into existence? So in late 70s, Government of India wanted to establish an organization which will connect the consumers in the urban areas, consumers of fruits and vegetables, with the producers in the rural areas. So given its experience already, National Dairy Development Board already has the experience in dealing with perishable commodity, which was milk. So Dairy Development Board, Mother Dairy particularly in Delhi, already had this supply chain developed for milk. So submitted a proposal, and that was approved by Minister of Agriculture in 1986. And in 1986, they started with a very modest attempt with only 12 retail outlets. Meanwhile, they started developing a central distribution facility in northwest part of Delhi on 22 acres of land. And within 15 months, the entire operation were in full-fledged action. And since 1988, it is in operation. And today, Safal is the market leader in organized food and vegetable retail business in Delhi NCR, and even it has significant presence since Bangalore. And Safal also is the first brand in India to launch frozen vegetables in the mid-90s. So these are some information. So this information is important to understand the scale and also to sort of the infrastructure that one needs to operate such kind of a supply chain. So Safal, as I already explained, has a central processing and distribution facility at Delhi on 22 acres of land. It handles 350 to 450 metric ton per day of fruits, fresh fruits and vegetables. It has the capacity to handle 1.2 lakh metric ton of fresh fruits and vegetables and process 4,500 metric ton of frozen peas and other items annually. It has all modern infrastructure, modern storage, ripening chambers, deep freeze and cold chain infrastructure. It also has a plant in Bangalore which produces and sells around 23,000 metric ton of fruit pulp and concentrate and supplies to international companies like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and it has now ventured into the export market also and sells to this multinational, as well as in 40 countries it supplies frozen and preserved fruits and vegetables. So at the back end, Safal's this procurement network is spread over 20 countries, including Northeast, and this is the irony. The irony is, sitting in Delhi, I get to eat vegetables and fruits from certain areas in Northeast, but you don't have a proper value chain supply chain developed for the Northeastern state itself. And so it has about 8,000 farmers and about 93 farmers growers associates. So Safal sources the produces the output from individual farmers, but mostly from it organize the farmers into farmers and growers organizations and then source it from them. And to help these farmers, they have their own agricultural graduate and postgraduates who provide basically them the extension services, like what kind of seeds to be used, fertilizers to be applied, and post-harvest care to be taken. And they have also established collection cum grading centers in rural areas covering a cluster of 8 to 10 villages. And there, these farmers, organization and in individual capacity, the farmers supply their produce to those centers. And then from those collection and grading centers, those are brought to the central processing and distribution facility. They are further sorted, processed, and then dispatched to the local outlets. Now, at the front end, you have the retail outlets, their own retail outlet. So the Safal from the central distribution facility or in their own vehicle will bring their product to this retail outlet. Prices are decided by Safal only, and usually these retail outlets are operated by ex-servicemen and they are dependent primarily the dependent of the ex-servicemen or ex-servicemen themselves. They operate this, and these are this Safal outlet is awarded for 2 years and it is renewed on the basis of their performance. Safal provides all the necessary infrastructure for the retail outlet, and at present there are 400 retail outlets in Delhi and NCR and 23 retail outlets in Bangalore, which cater to more than 1.5 lakh customers per day. And they have 130 institutional clients also, which include prominent government organizations like Parliament House, Rail Bhavan, National Zoo, premier hotels like Taj, Oberoi, Lalit, academic institutions like JNU and Delhi University, hospitals like AIIMS. So that's the front end. I am not aware of if Assam has anything equivalent of Safal, Now, however, in other states you will find that something like Safal exists in those states also. Like Maharashtra has replicated the Safal model. Kerala's Safal equivalent is called Horticrop. It's a fully state-owned government-owned company, state government-owned company. The model is exactly like Safal, and it's a big success there as well. So one might ask, how does this Safal model improve social welfare? why is it important to have a SOFL kind of model? It improves social welfare by improving farmers' income through assured market and assured price that the farmers receive. The consumer welfare through assured supply of quality product at reasonable price. But most importantly, it fills a vacuum that exists in a state like Assam, which is the extension service. So I did a study on extension service in Assam, and I found that 50% of my sample did not access extension service. And the remaining 50%, also of that, only 15% accessed public extension service, remaining 35% access private extension service, which basically come from the input traders, like those who sell fertilizers and pesticides and all that. Now, there is a problem. The problem is there could be a conflict of interest when the farmers depend on the private providers of extension service. Because if you go, I'm not saying that all input traders will do that, but it is in their interest to sell more of fertilizers and pesticide to the farmers who will come to them. So there's a conflict of interest. And I found that those farmers, in another study in the context of Assam, I found the farmers growing fruits and vegetable, particularly vegetable, use in certain cases like 300% more fertilizers and pesticides as compared to the recommended level as recommended by the Assam Agricultural University. So there's a huge vacuum. And when you have a license like SOFL, where they give the extension service to the farmers, then it fills that vacuum as well. And also that kind of a supply side might actually, by providing this extension service, may promote a diversified portfolio of crops. Otherwise, in Assam, you see it's mostly 7 or 8% of the total crop area is under fruits and vegetables. It's mostly paddy-based cropping pattern. And of course, it can generate employment as well in the process of creating this supply chain. So in this way, a SOFL kind of model can improve social welfare, and that's where the role of the public institution, role of the state in developing that kind of a supply chains, matters. Now, why I'm talking about, the government? The reason is, as I said, in normal situations, if you let to the market will deliver. But the missing links in the market get exposed in a crisis-like situation like this. And particularly for a state like Assam, it becomes more important because every year we face this heavy rain and the flood. Even if you have a developed supply chain, flood may still, disrupt the supply chain, but nevertheless, probably the disruption will be less. So given those peculiar condition in Assam, there is one can make this argument forcefully that the state should intervene or invest in developing such a supply chain. And also, you see, if the private sector develops, it's fine. But state has to develop, particularly in a state like Assam, that's because in developing that infrastructure like cold storage and, this entire supply chains, it involves a huge amount of money, which you will not find a private investor, forthcoming with a huge amount of investment in a state like Assam. In Delhi, in Maharashtra, where public demand is very high, probably you will find the private sector will come forward and invest. But in a state like Assam, the private investment will not come forward to make such kind of investment. So therefore, there is a reason why states should invest in a state like Assam. And then, however, so the lessons for Assam is, first of all, the government has to step in. And then to be successful, for that kind of a supply chain to be successful, first of all, we have to organize the farmers into farmers or producers organizations. Because if you have to deal individually with the farmers, then your transaction cost is very high to provide them the extension services, even to procure their produce. If you organize the farmers into organizations, farmers group, then it becomes much easier. And then the front end, like the back end, the front end is also, at least in the beginning, is very important. Like SOFL, as I said, has limited presence in Bangalore, but it was not very successful in Bangalore. Reason is because in Bangalore, they did not have the retail outlet. Whereas in Delhi, it's a huge success because they have their own retail outlet. Similarly, in Kerala, the horticrop, they have their own retail outlet. So it's a big success there as well. And finally, there has to be vertical integration so that the business may sustain. Like, for example, as I said, the Safal has now ventured into the export market, food processing. They sell to the multinational companies as well as export to many, many countries. So with this vertical integration, further expansion of the market, the business it becomes easier to sustain, that kind of, supply chain. So even in Delhi during this lockdown, it's not that, the supply chain did not get interrupted, but the problem is, at least for the consumers, they did not go through the hardship because Safal has its own storage capacities. Like, for example, apples and all that from Kashmir and Himachal could not come to Delhi, but already they had a huge amount of supply in their stock, and which then could be released to the market. So therefore, these are the lessons that a state like Assam can learn from a supply chains like Safal and can replicate in state like Assam. But as I said, the state has a big role to play in developing such kind of supply chain. And this doesn't have to be limited only to supply, vegetables and fruits. It can be developed in other areas, in meat, milk, fish, everywhere it can be developed. And one of the reasons why in Assam our cropping pattern is still in a paddy dominant cropping pattern, it's only because you do not have those market linkages. Now, in a normal situations, when vehicles can move, things are fine, you don't understand this. But this kind of a crisis exposes those missing linkages. And that's where you understand how it is important that the state has to intervene and public institution needs to be developed for improving social welfare. Thank you.
Thank you, Goswami sir. It is very nice presentation. You have explained nicely different issues related to supply chain, Safal model, and cold storage facilities in Assam. We will discuss the questions after at the end of the technical session. Next, I wanted to invite Professor Devakumar Chakraborty sir to deliver his presentation on India's development challenges in the wake of COVID-19. I request Gauri Shankar to unmute DKC sir.
EKC.
DKC sir. Oh, sir is not available now.
I think sorry. Oh yes, I have got it. Now, sir is entering.
Okay. Sir told me that there is a network problem.
Yes. Sir has just inside this meeting. Yes, DKC sir.
Yes. Yes, there was in fact a network problem, and that's why I just have to go out. Now, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Should I start?
Yes, sir. You can start, sir.
Is my PPT visible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. It is visible.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Avinash, as well as the team of B.K.B College Puranigudam for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts among the participants. And thank you, my earlier speakers, for throwing lights on very interesting things, particularly Professor Nath as well as Dr. Goswami, touching some important aspects of the economy. And my presentation will be on India's development challenges and issues that come up during the time of COVID. And I will touch upon some of the issues that the state of Assam will also have to look into in order to make the growth as well as development robust. As we know that for some time, a new world order is shaping in terms of, say, the share of world GDP by the countries, as well as the share in world trade by countries. That we see that India's position has been improving in terms of world GDP and in terms of world trade. And then that new world order encompasses some more things in terms of some soft power that India is having in terms of world space. Now, what are the implications of it and how things are changing over the years, particularly, say, if we look into the developments since January of this year? And the outbreak of coronavirus has caused an immense and shock to the Indian economy in the form of, what are the sudden shocks? I think there are at least 5 or 6. One is economic slowdown, because Indian economy was in a slowdown pace before COVID-19, but now that pace has been accelerating. Then deepening of income inequalities and poverty, obviously including unemployment, distressed labor migration, then government revenue crunch, and demand and supply disruption. So these were the immediate consequences of COVID-19 when we went for first lockdown, probably in March 2020. Now, let us discuss something about world trade that India is having right now. So if we look into the pessimistic scenario, so because now the world is facing kind of thing, and then the pessimistic scenario is saying that we will be detrend. So the red line, if we look into, then we'll be just off the trend. And if we at least follow the green, then probably we can catch up in 2022. Now, if we look into the composition of exports, that speaks a lot. Then major commodity groups recording negative growth during March 2020. These are oil mills, meat, dairy, poultry, engineering goods, etc. But when we look into imports, what is more important is that we have recorded a decline in machinery import or electrical and non-electrical items. These are more important, particularly the machinery, because machinery is a produced means of production. And when the import of machinery declines, then obviously the productive capacity of the economy will suffer a lot in the years to come. And the trade balance will have a negative overall balance, obviously, because our exports are less, and overall trade deficit will be around 70.16 billion USD. Now, composition and direction of trade has not been changed over the years. If we look into the pie, those things are there. I don't like to burden this presentation with lot many data and diagrams. Now, if we look into the composition and direction of trade, then we find that a very minor changes have taken place over the years. Particularly in terms of composition, we could not add many kind of diversified commodity in our basket. And then in terms of direction also, we could do a very little in this particular case. Say, for example, in terms of tea, we talk about our export of tea. Now, what happens if we look into the direction of tea export, then it is always a kind of fixed kind of thing. If you look into the pie, then say, for example, the country like Australia has been added to our export list only a few years back. So we somehow could not change the direction of our export. And similarly, we also failed to engage other countries in terms of our bilateral import and kind of export, those kind of engagements. Now, when we talk of investment, particularly in terms of portfolio investment, because there is no space for discussing foreign direct investment right now, because that is not taking that much of pace. Now, when we talk of portfolio investment, because that can happen at any point of time, that has recorded a serious decline in March and post-March also, so like April and May. And that will have a kind of ramifications for the industrial development of the country. And though our stock market is very robust, but still foreign portfolio investment is showing a negative trend. Now, what are the issues that come up from the anatomy of import and export? First, our composition and direction of trade will have to be diversified. That is the first. Then reap full benefits from government policies that has been declared. And then we will have to address the labor shortage, because many of the export houses could not address the labor shortage because of the distress migration and all. Then we will have to push the industry 4.0 that we are speaking about, industrial internet or Internet of Things, then artificial intelligence, then digital epidemic control and things. We will have to push these things all together, because the commodity basket of export will have to be reshaped and re-engineered. Otherwise, we cannot catch up the world, market post-COVID. And then we'll have to address the issue of labor shortage, and then engagement with ASEAN, maybe some other countries, like we have very little trade in terms of volume with Eurasian countries. So we'll have to look into those aspects of ASEAN, Eurasian, and all other countries. And then COVID-19 will emerge as a non-tariff barrier. That is very important, because nowadays we cannot push the tariff barriers because of WTO regime. But non-tariff barriers is very costly, because countries will now impose on different certifications, particularly for primary products like agricultural products, meat, poultry, all these products. And then we will have to be COVID ready, a country of COVID ready, otherwise our export sector will face different challenges for these non-trade barriers. Opportunities we'll be discussing slightly later on. Now, when we talk of industry, because export cannot be analyzed without taking care of the industrial sector, then we see a major change that has been taken in the definition of MSME in very recent years. And it has got several ramifications for the economy. One important change that has been given accord is the definition in terms of the turnover as well as investment. Earlier, the investment was the sole criteria for deciding a micro as well as medium and small industry. Now, since the new definition has a lot many, things there, I mean, some positives as well as negatives, because we have a turnover investment mismatch in different, industrial groups. Sometimes we have very little investment, but our turnover may be quite high. And in some cases, our investment may be quite high, but our turnover may be quite less. So like gems and jewelry market, or you can compare it with some agricultural products, agro industries kind of thing. So these two never matches. So if we take both the kind of parameters, so some of the industries which are genuinely, need the tag of micro, that particular industry may well be outside the micro industry. So this is one serious implication for the new definition. But obviously, investment cannot be a sole criteria for deciding micro industry, because investment depreciates, capital equipment depreciates. So obviously, over the years, a new player cannot compete with the player that is already existing in the market. So obviously, investment should be associated with turnover, but maybe for different categories of industries, a different definitions is required. But if we club the definition for all industry and service group, then it may it may so happen that some of the industries which require backup from the subsidy and other, government, some government supports may well be outside the MSME regime. Then we have wiped out the differences of the manufacturing and service sector. So it has also got some, important ramifications that we'll have to discuss, particularly in terms of investment and turnover. If we define the service sector in terms of investment, maybe it's quite less in terms of a manufacturing unit. Now, in a manufacturing unit, the same turnover may come up with a huge turnover, while service sector with the same turnover can be, achieved with a less, investment. So that will have some kind of, we'll have to do some kind of judicious breakup between the two. And then this is more important because we have around 6.34 crore unregistered non-agricultural MSMEs. It's quite large number. So we will have to look into the employment potential of that large number of MSMEs. Microsector is employment provider to about 1,076 lakh persons, which account for around 7% of total employment in the unorganized sector. So it's quite huge number. So we cannot just ignore this particular sector. And this sector is right now is suffering from lack of working capital. We don't have that much of, liquidity at hand, and we don't have the assured market and labor shortage. Because the problem that was in pre-COVID, that was simply from demand side. There was shortage in demand. But now the problem is from both demand and supply. And a number of units which are much larger will now be clubbed together under micro category itself. That's possible because investment depreciates and your turnover is not that high, because so some larger units might come in the micro category. So this has an important problem with reference to the priority sector lending, because the definition of priority sector has been changed over the years, and now the priority sector encompasses the micro sector also. And banks are duty bound to provide loans to the priority sector up to a certain extent. So now what happens if in the priority sector, in the micro sector, some larger units come, the actual units, the smaller units having low turnover and low investment may get, outside, find them outside from their priority sector lending net. So this may have some, greater ramifications, particularly in the informal sector. Now, while we talk about the year-on-year basis of credit and deposit growth, deposit is not that fundamental to us right now. But when we talk about credit, we know that Reserve Bank of India has taken serious measures for lowering the rates, and ultimately the rate cuts are, expected to get translated into some banking kind of instruments where, people get the credit at a lower rate. But if we look into the credit growth over the past several months, then we find that from April 19 till February 20, and then after that the curve will again come down and down and down. This year-on-year credit growth, that when we compare that particular credit in August 19 with the credit growth in August 18, that is called year-on-year credit growth, then it has been showing a declining trend. So ultimately the credit growth picture is not a very impressive one, and banks are under a very kind of serious stress because of two things. One is internal stress out of your own NPAs and all, and number two, the second stress is this COVID, because banks cannot function with proper staff. You have lockdowns and different things, and so ultimately this is one of the factors. The second factor is that the credit absorption capacity of the industries and the agricultural sector will also come down, because it is not that if I just supply the credit, that will be enough, but you will have to, economy should be able to absorb the credit. And that's why, I mean, this kind of situation is happening. Now, another challenge that the country is going to face is on account of overall human development and quality of life. One is, we know the components, so obviously the health will be a very serious problem for the country as a whole. COVID-19 is a health kind of problem, that is a separate issue. But the general health legacy that we are imbibing, that we are having, say, we are having the problem of infant mortality, we are having the problem of maternal mortality, we are having the problem of all those disease control. Say, for example, we had a kind of target for eradication of tuberculosis. We have a target of eradication of malaria. So all those kind of child vaccination, all those kind will suffer, and ultimately that will have induced and indirect and direct some ramifications in future. Then second is literacy, because student dropout might increase because schools are closed for for some time, and then the parental income will come down, so it is likely that children will join the labor market, and that will again create the problem. And then income is income, and it has been taken. I have mentioned about the fall in the income. Now, another area that is off late is very important because inflation is picking up. When we look into the inflation, anatomy of inflation, then we find that inflation is hitting the poor as well as lower middle class people. Because what is happening, the food articles and primary articles, the inflation is jumping. If we look into 2021, that is only 3-4 months, in comparison to 1920, the whole year. So roughly not comparable, but still if we compare, then you find that primary articles, it's 6.42, and wholesale price inflation rise, and food article is quite high, is 7.33. And so ultimately that will have kind of stress on the people, particularly the poor people as well as the lower middle income group. Then if we look into the retail inflation, so obviously retail inflation in June 19, it was 8.15%, but now the retail inflation in total is 6.09, because we don't have that much of demand for manufactured items as well as service sector. So that's why the retail inflation altogether, if we look into the total retail inflation, that is year-on-year basis is less. That is right now is 6.09%. But when we look into the composition, then it reflects a totally different picture, particularly for the food and beverages. Then we find that some items like pulses, then you look into some milk products and meat and fish, then spices, all those kind of things. It reflects a kind of very serious situation, and these things will impact the poor people much, and because they'll have to purchase food commodities, and that's why inflation is another challenge that the country will have to have in future. And this inflation is mostly, it's not that simple kind of demand and supply will reflect the whole issue, but it's in my mind is to some extent structural in the sense that we have to look into the supply chain, in how we can manage the supply chain properly. And it's not simply in terms of curtailment of demand or pushing the supply altogether. Then there is another that we'll have to look into in terms of the informal sector, because till now, if we look into this table, it has recently come up, then we have not been very aggressive in addressing the issues of the informal sector, because informal sector is quite large. It is a quite sufficient number of people we are engaged in informal sector, as well as we contribute sufficiently to the GDP of the country. Now, the policies, if we look into our policies, policy intervention towards informal sector is quite less during the COVID time. Only if we see the green, then those things are yes. For Assam, we have some policies for migrant laborers, and very recently, state government has taken some policy for street vendors. And but in other things, we don't have that much of policy interventions. Say for example, take the case of street vendors. We have a very clear-cut guidelines from the government of India that the state should have kind of rules and regulations for street vendors, but majority of the states could not implement it properly. So these things are there, and even there are demands that street vendors should also be given the license to deal with the essential commodities. Then only their survivals can be ensured. And then there we are not talking about waste pickers, then domestic workers. We are not talking about construction workers. A bit we are talking about, but we don't have a clear policy regarding that. And homeless people, and many, we can think of many, all those kind of things. So policy intervention in this particular sector of distress is seriously lacking. Then we are talking about labor reforms, particularly in terms of working hours. Many states have implemented in terms of working hours that we can extend it up to 9, 10, or maximum up to 12. Now, whether it is feasible, and it has got some social stress in terms of maybe it shall discourage women labor force participation. So while we take some economic policy, my argument is that we will have to look into a calibration of social and economic policies, social and economic ramifications, social and economic outcomes. It's not simply that we look into the productivity in productivity's shake. So these things have to be addressed. Then if we look into the state responses, then the first response is in terms of Atmanirbhar Bharat. It's said that it's around 10% of GDP, but though it is said that it's not totally subsidy driven, it is kind of, you have credit and subsidy mix, and kind of budgetary provisions, as well as some separate fiscal provisions. But the target is from survival to revival, how we can revive our economy, particularly the industrial sector and agricultural sector and informal sector, and labor class. So 5 pillars of Atmanirbhar Bharat has been identified very specifically: economy, infrastructure, system, vibrant demography, and demand. And another policy response was in terms of the return migration, the people who came back from different parts of the country. And we talked about the intervention in terms of MG and Rega. And then we said that we will have to, provide them job card as and when necessary. Now, let us see the vision for future country as well as the state. A close association between economic and social policy is required. We don't have that. We'll have to calibrate some kind of economic and social policy in terms of harnessing the social capital also. We talk less about social capital. And then while designing nationwide policy, space need to be given for region and state specific policy. I'll just give this example. Say for 15th Finance Commission tied grants, we have 2 different grants under 15th Finance Commission, every Finance Commission. One is tied grant, another is untied grant. Now in tied grant, few domains are identified. What are those? One is sanitation, maintenance of the ODF, drinking water, rainwater harvesting, and water recycling. And if you look in Assam, in our state, then you find that many of the primary schools, if you have seen, I don't know, you could find rainwater harvesting tanks. Now those things are not doing anything good for anyone, but those things are pure in terms of utilization of funds, because it is a national dictate. Now, what I would like to mention is that just now we have received, state has received 15 Finance Commission tight grant for 2021, this particular financial year. But as we are stuck towards these domains only, so now in COVID, we need something different. Maybe we need to clear the value chain. We need something, we require to push the industries. We need something. But since these things are mandated, I mean, so we'll have to, we are duty bound. I mean, we just cannot go beyond this scope. So my argument is that while designing some national policy, space should be there for calibration, some kind of, some kind of judicious mix of those policies in a particular region specific or state specific needs. Then we will have to use the labor and capital very deeply, particularly in agriculture in a state like Assam. We talk about much of agriculture and labor, labor and capital productivity in agriculture, but you see that we are still practicing single cropping. In some of the districts we have double cropping, but mostly it's monocropping. So we will have to push labor and capital and land to the fullest extent of the term, and probably by forming some farmers cluster, we can push double cropping to some extent. And then another very important is innovation, because this COVID-19 has given immense space. Professor Nath only a few minutes back discussed much about innovation and invention. Now innovation is there, it's being taking place, and it's taking place like anything, only yesterday I got a pen which contains itself the sanitizer. I mean, it has come up in the market. So, I mean, new things are coming up, from a small pen to industrial internet or anything. You can think of any kind of innovation that can fetch the market. Then value addition is very important. In a state like Assam, we say, for example, why value addition is important. Say, for example, in our state, we have a very big market for tourism, but tourism market is going to suffer in the days to come. Now, when we talk of value addition in tourism market, you find that in Assam, we have done very less. We have done very little. Now, if you have visited Kaziranga yesterday, and if you have visited Kaziranga 10 years back, you will find roughly the same picture. If you have visited Sibsagar yesterday, and if you have visited Sibsagar 10 years back, you will get the same story to speak. So unless and until you have value addition to the tourism industry, you cannot attract at least domestic tourists. At the moment, say for example, foreign flights are not going to operate for quite some time from now. But at least if you like to attract domestic tourists, at least if you like to attract the local tourist, then value addition is a must. Number two, tourism in our state is something sightseeing kind of an affair is happening. Tourism should contribute to the income of the or livelihood of the people who are involved in the tourism industry. But that is not, there is a study which has come up with the kind of articulation that even in Kaziranga, the household income generation from tourism industry and household income generation from other sources, there is no significant difference between the two. So this is very important that we'll have to look into in terms of value addition. If you have value addition, then income will be generated. If you don't have value addition, then you cannot place tourism as an industry. So it is not only that tourism is the sector where we'll have to talk about value addition. It is the other sectors where we'll have to talk about value addition. Even in case of our agricultural sector, we talk about value addition in terms of different commodities. Like if you have tea, you can produce different, commodities or different products out of your tea. So you can add value to your 1 kg of tea. So and experiments are going on, even with rice, different varieties of rice you are producing, different commodities out of it. So things are being shaping but the pace at which we are moving is very slow. And so state intervention is required, particularly for a state like Assam, where we'll have to push these things in a uh, fast forward way. So I think with this positive note, I think the state will come up with a very good roadmap for future development of the state. And this will, we will be able to probably see good days in near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chakraborty sir. It is a nice presentation. You have nicely explained the different issues related to informal sector, inflation, MSME, portfolio investments, shortage of demand and supply sides, value addition, credit and deposit growth of banking sectors, etc. and etc. With this, our technical sessions are over. Now, with due permission from our resource person, I would like to discuss few questions raised by our participants. May I, sir?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So, sir, should I unmute all of the participants, or in the chat box, from chat box, you are going to take the question?
I'm picking from the chat box.
Okay.
I've seen that many participants have raised the different questions in the chat box and eagerly waiting to hear answers from our resource persons, but it is not possible to discuss all the questions because of shortage of time. So I'll randomly pick up only 2 or 3 questions to our resource persons for conversation. The first question, wait, sir. The first question asked by Nisibrata Hazurika to Chakraborty sir. Sir, she wrote that, sir, could you kindly elaborate on the present demand side crisis? How can that be revived? Because I feel addressing the demand protest is equally important as far as development is concerned. So what is your take on the demand crisis in particular? Please, sir, Chakraborty sir.
Okay. Demand depends on two things. In my mind, demand depends on two things. The first is it will depend upon unlock process, the process that we follow. So we are in unlock, say Guwahati is under unlock 1. So that unlock model will tell you how the demand crisis will be managed. So we will have to make the unlock process a bit calibrated with kind of economic principles. Number 2, the demand will be taken care of by the monetary policies to some extent, particularly the rate cuts awarded by the Reserve Bank of India. That should be translated into practice by the banks. But I told you that 2 factors are there. One is the bank.
Sir.
Yes, I think his connection got disrupted.
Yes, disrupted.
B.K.C. sir?
B.K.C. sir?
Since you don't have much time, probably you can pick up other questions. Meanwhile, if he logs in again, you can ask him the question again.
Yes, sir.
Sir? B.K.C. sir is not available, so I wanted to proceed to in next question, which was put forwarded by Kusumananda Nath. He is a PG student from Assam University. He asked the question to Binoy sir. He wants to know that is this a shuffle model can be considered under agricultural marketing strategy?
Yeah, it is agricultural market. Part of agricultural marketing strategies. You can strategize your marketing process in different ways. So, shuffle model could be one of that. So here, the point, which I see, the main problem that we have in Assam or a state like Assam is that the farmers don't get the market. That's why every year, you hear that farmers are throwing the tomatoes that they grow and they don't get market, they don't get the price. Everything comes at the same time to market. So therefore, you have too much of supply, and sometimes the price that the market price that they receive is not even sufficient to cover the cost. Cost of production. So all those things can be sorted out to a large extent if marketing strategies are developed, and one of those marketing strategies could be developing this supply side. And that, as I say, could be done by the private sector or in a public-private partnership mode or by the public sector itself. And my argument is that, in state like Assam, there could be a forceful argument to have public sector investment in developing such kind of supply chain. And the reason is not, of course, every year you will not have pandemic. I wish, I hope, I pray that we don't have this kind of situation every year. But nevertheless, what is common to Assam every year is the heavy rain and the supply chain disruption during the flood. So given that this is a regular thing, we need to have a solution to that. And even during flood and heavy rain, people in the urban and semi-urban areas, will have to buy at certain time. They won't get vegetables and fruits, and if they have gate, they will buy at very high price. And secondly, for the farmers, it's become very difficult to find a market. So all those problems can be solved if you have a model like Shuffle. And in the context of Assam, because it involves huge investment in developing the infrastructure, and you probably do not have the demand, however, that you would see in Delhi. Shuffle model is very successful in Delhi, but Shuffle caters to only 10% of the total demand. So you can understand the amount, the demand that the market has. So you may not have that kind of demand, therefore you may not find private sector. So therefore there is an argument for public investment, and of course it's one of the marketing strategies that should be adopted.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Can go to the next question, I guess. Now.
Thank you, sir. Chakrabarty, sir.
Yes. Yes.
Your answer, sir.
Yes. Yes.
Sir, kindly complete your answer, sir.
Yeah. So my take was that the demand revival is a multitasking effort. It's not simply from one side that the demand revival will take place. From the side of unlock process will be the first one in my understanding, that we'll have to judicially follow the unlock process. We'll have to make a balance between unlock process as well as the scenario of COVID. That is number one. So there must be some economics in between. Then number two, the rate cuts of RBI should be translated to the reality, to the manufacturing units as well as consumers. So banks will have to come out of the stress, because banks are under stress from two counts I discussed a bit earlier. And then now banks are also suffering from infections, and all people are suffering. So that issue will have to take some time, that to resolve. And probably sometimes what happens, that innovations and inventions also push up the demand. So it is not that simply that something stereotype will push the demand. And as Dr. Goswami has rightly said, that if you have something in the front, to sell something like shuffle model, so if that kind of supply chain, if you can maintain for different, because demand also get disrupted because of some rigidities. If you don't have proper supply chain, then demand gets disrupted. So if you have proper supply chain in place, then demand revival will be easier. So I think it is a multitasking, work. It is not a unidimensional work. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Kusubananda Nath also asks another question to Hiranyanath sir. Sir, he wants to know that, as you have mentioned about the drones in delivery system, and sir, you have mentioned that it will create unemployment amongst those delivery sectors. So my question, how this can be resolved with the technological innovation? Nath sir, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. It is a very important and interesting question. Although now we are kind of talking about this kind of innovation in response to the COVID-19 crisis, but there have been some structural changes that have been taking place over a long period of time. Those changes have already taken place in developed countries, and very soon they are coming to the developing countries as well. So for example, this is an example of, let's say, automation, right? So the physical labor is basically replaced by machine. And that has been happening for a long period of time. Even during the industrialization, there are a lot of things happen as a result of which human labor was replaced by the machine. And again, going forward, this will happen. Obviously, at what speed this will take place will depend on a lot of factors. Political factors will also depend on the policy factors. But then I think in the 21st century, one thing that we should incorporate in our curriculum, and that goes beyond like just managing our employment and unemployment, is that we need the students in the 21st century has to have this ability to adapt, because technology is rapidly changing. You like it or don't like it, it is going to replace some of our jobs, even jobs with your cognitive ability. Like, it's not about like those who do physical work, but even those who have education, who will be entering the labor market, they will face the same challenge. So what is important in this, in order to survive in this kind of market or in this emerging scenario, is to have the ability to adapt to changes. And for that, there are certain skills. For example, critical thinking is a skill that you have to develop. Of course, when it comes to low-level jobs, that will be like for a country like India, where we have a huge population. At the same time, we have still a large percentage of people who are illiterate or do not have access to education, I would say. For them, well, it will be challenging. And again, to what extent these kind of structural changes will affect the labor market will depend on a lot of non-economic factors. I would say there are some inertias which are, well, everywhere in all times during our human history. We have those inertias, and that will kind of push a brake onto those structural changes that are coming from those very kind of logically progressed technology. So that's what is going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Natsha. Now I'm picking another one question from the chat box, which is asked by Korobi Bora, and it is all. This question is asked to also Natsha. Sir, what according to you are the potentialities in employment generation in the third world countries after the pandemic is over? This is her question to you, sir.
Well, Again, I think there was a question about the demand. Of course, in economics, we all, particularly the macroeconomics, we believe that when there is an economic crisis, there is a recession, what happens is actually demand goes down. And well, during this crisis also, because the origin of this crisis is very different. The healthcare crisis at this point, or public health crisis, I should rather say public health crisis, has actually affected both the demand side and the supply side. So what will happen once the economy opens up, once this public health crisis is over, certain things will come back very quickly. So as a result, so economy will come back to one level. But still, because of this prolonged effect, what will happen, the economy will still probably in a slowdown mode or a kind of a recession. And in order to recover from the recession, I think there will be a need for an aggregate demand kind of push. And obviously, kind of very simple, direct Keynesian type of a recommendation is that, well, government will have to step up. They will have to increase their expenditure. Of course, they are also the central bank. In our case, it is the Reserve Bank of India will have to play a role. So Reserve Bank Bank of India probably will already has started kind of injecting liquidity into the system, but for various reasons that credit channel has not worked, like Dr. Chakraborty has already explained. There are some other problems as well, because what has happened over last 10 years after the global financial crisis, that also has affected why the credit channel is not working. There is something called a twin balance sheet problem, and that has been pretty much kind of is restricting the banking sector. They are behaving more in a very risk-averse manner for last few years, and well, last 2 years at least. And then even now, they are not kind of coming out of that risk-averse mode. Of course, the situation has become even riskier. So what Reserve Bank going forward does in terms of their regulations with respect to this commercial banks will also have an impact. So again, when we talk about the government creating artificial demand, so which are the sectors they will have to invest or they will have to put their money? I would say that India still is a developing country. Our infrastructure is not up to that level where we can probably make that next move. And I think infrastructure would be a big area where we can create employment for the majority of the people. And then at the upper end, I think there will be a large, for example, those computer engineers, for those people who are highly skilled, there will be a very large global demand, I would say, because there are certain areas where this the growth will be huge. Even I'm thinking that the service sector will be creating a lot of, already has created a lot of demand. For example, whatever we are doing right now, like through the internet or through Zoom or Webex, and that is a huge market. Well, now think about that. You probably all countries around the world, particularly developed world, will be engaging some of the high-skilled people from India. So there is a very good scope for high-skilled workers. And then at the lower end, who do not have high skill, they generally supply physical labor. I think that is where the government should play a very important role. And then, of course, has to incentivize the agriculture sector. That is always a big employment creator for Indian population. So thank you. It's a good question.
Thank you, sir. I'm picking the last question, which is asked by Meenakshi Bhagavati. How can private sector investment be attracted towards Assam, and which sectors have the potential for private sector investment? Actually, DKC sir is not available, so I request the Binoy Goswami sir to give the answer to this participant.
Okay, so it's very difficult at the moment to say this, like which are the sectors we are doing a proper market study. But as I said, parallel to the government investment, even in agriculture in certain areas, the private sector can also invest. And then there is a huge investment scope in Assam, in the service sector, in the, again, medical tourism, in education, hotel, restaurant services sector, there is a huge uh, uh, scope for investment for the private sector. And, I don't have time to get into details of that, but if certain investments are made by the state in the agriculture sector as a forward linkage, there's small scale sectors like in the food processing and that kind of sectors, uh, agriculture and allied sectors, to the next level with forward linkage, there could be a lot of investment coming from the private sector. But whatever be those sectors, whether it is food processing, and within food processing, there could be hundreds of avenues where one can think of attracting private investment. So what I think, however, for all this to happen, for the private sector is not just going to come and invest, okay, let me invest something in Assam. It hasn't happened so far. For that, there are certain basic things in terms of infrastructure and, providing better power connections and all those sort of things. That first step has to come from the government. And once those things are done, and then, as I said, even for development of the supply chains and all that, then many sectors, the private investment will come. But for that, you need to first create the foundation by providing basic, good quality, not just any type of infrastructure, but good quality infrastructure. And then you will see investment picking up in different sector in private sector, from the private investors.
Thank you, Goswami sir. With this, I would like to conclude the discussion session. Thank you, all the participants, for your active participation. Now, Dr. Kamal Hoike sir, Associate Professor of our college, is also available among us. So I request the Kamal sir to say a few words on this occasion. Over to Kamal sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes. Am I audible to you? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Am I audible to you, Avinash?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Okay. And first of all, my sincere greetings to all the great resource persons deliberating on a very special issue, very current issue, I should say, and at the same time exploring different issues, prospects, and challenges in a situation we have been suffering from. Well, it's our privilege that Dr. B.K.B College, under the leadership of the Department of Economics, we have been introduced to a very fantastic and very amazing sort of panel discussion on the current issues. And first of all, I would like to thank particularly all the three great resource persons for sharing their ideas, apprehensions, challenges, and at the same time, opening our mind to the different issues as such. Well, perhaps considering the limited time being assigned to me, and also it is almost 12:13, I would like to simply mention that having listened to the very fascinating discussion by the three great specialists, and myself being an alien to this subject, perhaps I am not the right person to make any critical observation on what have been informed to us or deliberated on. Instead, what I would like to do is that, well, this is the planning of the international webinar, as we have been very meticulously dealt with, because it starts with a very general sort of discussion, I should say, when we have been expecting something technical from Dr. Nath, but he chose to speak on a very philosophizing sort of general issues, and that was very much interesting for me particularly. And quite rightly, he has explored that the crisis that has been created from whatever sources. It's a different matter. But thing is that this crisis makes us ready. This crisis makes us review. This crisis makes us think about what we have done in the past and what we should do in the future, and how we can learn from the crisis itself. And quite naturally, he has explored it from a philosophical point of view. And what I feel that, as Hegel had mentioned long before, the tragedy is that we never learn from history. What we learn is to unlearn from history. My point is that this virus, COVID-19, etc., that has ravaged the entire setup, the civilization itself, and some of the great master thinkers of the world of late have expressed their views too. What we feel that unless we think it rationally, unless we review our entire the sort of mechanism on which we have developed our civilization, perhaps the crisis will not be over. Naturally, this particular aspect being deliberated on by Dr. Nath has made us think about this particular aspect. And coming to the next two lectures, as I would say, Professor D.K. Chakraborty and Dr. Binoy Goswami, these are very much subject specific, domain specific, and obviously both the lectures have taken up wider issues and preparing us what to do and what we not do. But my point is that, having listened to these two lectures particularly, what comes to my mind is that viewed from the perspective of Assam, we have seen in a pandemic situation today in Assam, some of the unprecedented crises that we have been reeling under. The flood, number one, and just a few days back, we had an unprecedented oil crisis, the blowout, and causing large-scale devastation to the life and ecology of that particular area. You see, at a time when we have been fighting against COVID-19, we have been beset with so many other issues directly related to our livelihood, related to the peripheral lifestyles of the people, the marginal communities as such. What I feel is that at this crisis, our state leadership, our government, our state agencies should be very much rational in taking up the policies as to what we can do well to steer through this particular crisis. Unfortunately, perhaps we haven't seen this sort of tenacity, this sort of transparency that we have needed. I would like to refer to this particular point that what I feel, hello, am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what I feel that this, and that is perhaps something we should do immediately, not only in Assam, but in the entire area, globally we can think. If we cannot protect the local, if we cannot enrich the local, perhaps the very idea of the global is an utopia. The very idea of the global will remain an utopia unless we can protect the diversity, the potentiality, the resources located in the local, say Assam, say Madhya Pradesh, say in different parts of the country. This is perhaps a great challenge. My point is that there should be a new consciousness and awareness and academic debate on the issue of good governance. Good governance should be constitutionally projected so that within the purview of good governance, we can bring the ideas of social justice, number one, and environmental ecology on the other. These issues must be protected by the laws of the land, and we must not allow these diversities, these potentialities to be dealt with, to be used rather recklessly and rampantly by the corporate houses. Unfortunately, we have seen that at a time when the peripheral realities are quite unfortunate, we have given license to the corporate houses to explore and to exploit the resources that naturally belong to the people. This imbalance has widened the gap of poverty and social justice, what may be called, and perhaps that can be solved by bringing to the purview of good governance. Good governance should be the guiding principle. It doesn't matter which ideology the state ultimately accepts. It may be a very essential part for the Marxist government or right or left, whatever it is, but good governance should be the foundation of the kind of things that we are going to plan. Otherwise, perhaps what Slavoj Žižek has already mentioned, the great philosopher of the world, the living philosopher, he has mentioned very clearly that if we cannot review the entire existing mechanics or mechanism of an economic growth, perhaps the whole world will be pushed into barbarism. This is a great warning from the philosopher, Marxist philosopher Slavoj Žižek, and even and other people have also deliberated on this issue. But what we see today, that even in a pandemic situation, the countries are preparing for a war. We are planning to fight against China, and China is trying to fight against India. The neighborhood is already in a imbroglio. So perhaps this is not a very good signal for us. And we would like to, the platform that have dealt with so many different and critical issues today will obviously give a starting point. I mean, it has opened the platform to the policymakers or government agencies and other sectors also to take note of the basic suggestions that have come out from this platform. With this few words, that's my observation, because I am not the competent person to comment on specifically on the speeches being delivered by the experts, the specialists. So this is a general sort of observation I have made, and I think that might do. And thank you so much. Over to Avinash. Hello. Hello. Avinash? Dr. Avinash?
Avinash has to unmute.
Thank you, Kamal sir.
You can continue, Avinash, now. Okay, because time is over, I think.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, Kamal sir. Now we have reached at the last stage of this program. I would like to request Shraddhanjali Bhattacharya to offer vote of thanks. Over to Shraddhanjali.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. A very good morning to all. I, on behalf of the Department of Economics, Dr. B.K.B. College, Puranigudam, offer my sincere regards to our principal, Dr. Nipen Chandra Das, sir, for his kind speech inaugurating this webinar. Secondly, I offer my sincere regards to Dipjyoti Burman, IQAC coordinator, Pandu College, for his collaboration in organizing this webinar. We are very fortunate to have with us Professor Hiranyakumar Nath sir, Department of Economics and International Business, Sam Houston State University, Texas, who spoke on the good, the bad, and the ugly of COVID-19. I offer my best regards to him. Professor Devkumar Chakraborty, Department of Economics, Dibrugarh University, has delivered his valuable speech on India's development challenges in the wake of COVID-19. I extend my warm greetings to Professor Chakraborty sir. I offer my sincere wishes to Dr. Binoy Goswami, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, South Asian University, New Delhi, for his speech on pandemic, public institutions, and social welfare. Dr. Kamal Chandra Soikia sir, Associate Professor of Dr. B.K.B. College, Puranigudam, has delivered his analytical speech. I offer my best regards to him. I offer my sincere regards to Dr. Jogesh Kakoti, Principal of Pandu College, for his kind support in this collaboration. I offer my sincere gratitude to Dr. Gauri Shankar Karmakar, Librarian, Pandu College, for his technical support in successful completion of the webinar. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the participants for their participation and wish you all the best from Dr. B.K.B. College, Puranigudam. Once again, I offer my sincere vote of thanks to you all. It's been a pleasure being with all of you today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Shraddhanjali.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Avinash.
I'm personally thankful to all the resource persons, principal sir of our college, Principal Sir of Pandu College, Deputy Burman Sir, Kamal Chandra Saikia Sir, Dr. Gauri Shankar Karmakar Sir, and all the participants. With this, I want to conclude the webinar. Thank you, Vinay Sir, Nath Sir, and Chakraborty Sir.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Thank you.
Here is an announcement to the participants.